Your DNA is not your destiny. Never let who you are being get in the way of who you are becoming. A quote from Elizabeth Alicia. This is a K-Power workshop. We don't diagnose and we don't treat anything. K-Power works towards balancing the body energies to maximize the body's healing opportunity. In the K-Power model, we work with energy systems in the body, and anything you do, say, or suggest that a client implement is aimed at restoring the flow of their own natural energies and helping them achieve their maximum potential as a human being. In K-Power, we help people find their own magic and leave the obstacles of their past behind them. The K-Power seesaw of life. K-Power educates to give choice. Let's look over here at early death. And this is where we have disease, signs, symptoms of disease up here, at where we've got the neutral point of the lever of the teeter-totter seesaw. And this is where most medicines interact, and even most natural therapies and kinesiologies, really. Then on the other side of the teeter-totter seesaw, we have education, growth, potential. And this is where high-level wellness and vitality is the real goal of K-Power. The purpose of this workshop is to help reduce human suffering related to common universal fears, job stresses, and relationship issues. Those completing this unit will be able to help provide mental and emotional self-care for themselves, their friends, families, clients, and students using the ICPKP's 5 epigenetic healing cycles. That's the International College of Professional Kinesiology Practitioners, ICPKP. These epigenetic cycles harness the power of the general circulation of energy wheel. Students will learn that your DNA is not your destiny, and that by changing their perceptions and behaviors, they can shape and direct their own genetic expression. Here's Dr. Dawson Church. Fantastic things can happen when you shift from a position of worry, anxiety, and stress to one of happiness, joy, and love. You produce profound biological changes in your body. This is from The Genie in Your Genes, Epigenetic Medicine and the New Biology of Intention. We teach in this workshop that your DNA is not your destiny. You get what you turn on, either genes of healing and longevity or genes of cell decay, degeneration, and death. Your DNA is not your destiny. In 1953, Sir Francis Crick said, biological information is transferred sequentially and only in one direction, from the DNA to the RNA and finally to the protein. Medicine adopted this model, known as the central dogma. The Human Genome Project of the 1990s confirmed this reductionist train of thought. Every cell of your body has the same DNA pattern, which is called your genome. But a controller tells some cells to become muscle, skin, bone, heart, kidney, and other tissues. That controller is called the epigenome. Epigenetics is the study of heritable changes in gene function that occur without a change in the DNA sequence. Here is the human genome. The human genome is the complete assembly of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. We each have about 3 billion pairs, 3 billion base pairs. That makes each person a unique individual. The DNA holds the instructions for building the proteins that carry out a variety of functions in a cell. This is just the other one blown up. So here we have, let's start here with the cell. This is the cell. Inside the cell is the genome. And the genome is made up of all of these genes, and the genes have the chromosomes. See the chromosomes there? Okay, so that's this, all of this is this. Now let's take a look here. We have the genes, which is made up of lots of DNA, and the DNA has protein information inside of it. And here's the proteins, and they contain information. The proteins can either act alone or in complexes to perform many cellular functions. And the genes contain instructions for making proteins. Let's talk about epigenome versus genome. So we just looked at the genome here, which this is what we're given, but the epigenome shows us what we can do to affect what we're given. So the epigenome is a multitude of chemical compounds which attach to DNA and modify its function. It controls gene expression. It tells the genome what to do. It controls which genes are turned on, and it controls which genes are turned off. It uses tags or markers, and the science is complex. In simple terms, they call this simple terms, methyl groups tag DNA and activate or repress genes. Histones are proteins around which DNA can wind for gene regulation. And here's that little diagram blown up. So let's take a look here. We will start up here. Epigenetic mechanisms are affected by these factors and processes. So development in utero and childhood. Now, I think about primitive reflexes, and so many kids that I've worked with in the special education classroom have the primitive reflexes that have not been integrated. They're still active, and that affects their development. And here we're learning that it can also affect what genes are turned on and what genes are turned off. So here's some other things: environmental chemicals, drugs, pharmaceuticals, aging, and diet. So here's the chromosome, and here's the chromatin. And chromatin is basically the DNA, the RNA, and the protein all together, like we saw on the other diagram. And here's the DNA. So here's a methyl group, and see how it attaches itself, it tags to the DNA there. The methyl group, an epigenetic factor found in some dietary sources, can tag DNA and activate or repress it, depending on what it is. Okay, now here's another inset here. And shows the DNA and histones, how the DNA can wrap around these histones here and the gene, and then what it does, it makes the DNA inaccessible, and it makes the gene inactive when it squeezes it around and contracts it. Histones are proteins around which DNA can wind for compaction and gene regulation. Okay, so see here, they're all packed together. Now in this one, you see how they're spread apart. And here is the histone tail coming off of this histone. And this shows that the DNA is accessible and the gene is active because it's not contracted like this or compacted. And here is an epigenetic factor. Now, depending on what this factor is, if it's negative or positive, if it's negative, these epigenetic factors can be at the health endpoint. It can cause cancer, autoimmune disease, mental disorders, or diabetes. Here we have the dynamic epigenome, an example of two sets of twins. Molecular control of gene expression. Identical twins are the perfect example of epigenetics. Although they share exactly the same DNA, their unique experiences in life will cause some genes and not others to express themselves. This is why over time, identical twins come to look and behave differently. The top two ladies are 61 years old. The lower two are late 20s. Epigenetic research results. Information flows in both directions, DNA to RNA to proteins, and from proteins to DNA to RNA to DNA, thus contradicting the central dogma. Remember in slide 7, they adopted that belief in as early as late as the 1990s that information only flowed from the DNA to the RNA to the proteins. But in fact, later years, they found that that's not true. It goes both directions. Genes can be activated and deactivated by signals from the environment. Genes change their expression depending on what is happening outside our cells and even outside our bodies. Every cell in our body has a type of consciousness. Isn't that cool? The consciousness of the cell is inside the cell's membrane. And Dr. Bruce Lipton likes to say cell membrane. And here is Dr. Lipton. Your cell can choose to read or not read your genetic blueprint. The true secret to life does not lie within your DNA, but rather within the mechanisms of your cell membrane. Each cell membrane has receptors that pick up various environmental signals, and this mechanism controls the reading of the genes inside your cells. Your cells can choose to read or not read the genetic blueprint depending on the signals being received from the environment. This is from his famous book, The Biology of Belief. Here's Dr. Randy Jirtle, PhD, the father of nutritional epigenetics. He says, unlike defective genes, which are damaged for life, methylated genes can be demethylated. When needed methyl tags are knocked off, they can be regained via nutrients or drugs and enriching experiences. Nutrition isn't a fleeting affair, said Jirtle. We are quite literally what we eat, as well as what our parents and even grandparents ate. So think about that. That's pretty remarkable. He used the standard obese mouse bred for trials, and he gave the mice vitamin B6, B12, folic acid, choline, and betaine, and it changed the coat color and decreased the risk of obesity, diabetes, and cancer in the offspring in 1 generation. Check this out. Epigenetic modulation. So here is the mom, and here is the baby. Look at the difference. Vitamin B12, folic acid, choline, and betaine changed coat color and decreased the risk of obesity, diabetes, and cancer in offspring in one generation. It's not that she was stepping out. It was he was feeding these good vitamins. Really. All right, Dr. Jean-Pierre Issa from the University of Texas Anderson Cancer Center. Everyone has tumor suppressor genes that stop cancer cell growth. Suppressor genes are in every cell in your body, but so are histones or coiling proteins. Histones can hug DNA so tightly that it is hidden from the view for the cell. If a tumor suppressor gene is hidden, it cannot be utilized. And in this way, too much histone will turn off these cancer suppressors, and this allows cancer cells to proliferate. Epigenetics could prove more important than genetics for understanding environmental causes of disease, including cancer, atherosclerosis, and Alzheimer's. Okay, I just made this bigger for us. Now let's take, actually this is the same that we just talked about. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, the same thing. So again, if they're compacted together, the DNA is inaccessible, the gene is inactive. But if it's more loose, then the DNA is accessible and the gene is active. So here we have Professor Shigo Nakamura, leader team for familial cancers in Japan. A wide variety of illnesses, behaviors, and other health indicators already have some level of evidence linking them with epigenetic mechanisms. These include cancers of almost any type, almost all types. Cognitive dysfunction, cardiovascular, respiratory, reproductive, autoimmune, and neurobehavioral illnesses. Epigenetic modulators are many, including heavy metals, pesticides, diesel exhaust, tobacco smoke, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, radioactivity, hormones, viruses, bacteria, and basic nutrients. Here's a graphic of epigenetic modulation and things that can change, things that can change it. So let's start here at the top. Diet could change it either direction, right? Depending on your diet, it could be a negative factor or a positive. Diurnal seasonal correlations, perhaps in a long winter with no sun, a person could have depression. Disease exposure, toxic chemicals such as smoking or now vaping, drugs of abuse, our financial status, if we're worried about where our next meal is coming from or if we can't pay the rent, that can affect our epigenetic modulation. Exercise or lack of can affect it. Our microbiome, our good bacteria versus our bad bacteria in our gut. Therapeutic drugs can affect it as well. Alternative medicine, hopefully in a positive way. Social interactions or lack of social interactions can affect our epigenetic modulation, and also psychological state, how we're doing psychologically. So we're going to look at some of these in future slides here. Epigenetic modulators for foods or diet. Vegetables with histone inhibitors, and here this is research of Dr. Jirtle again. Cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, kale, radishes allium vegetables like garlic, onions, leeks, chives. These all contain histone inhibitor substances. They block the histone, allowing your tumor suppressor genes to activate and fight cancer. By regularly consuming these foods, you are naturally supporting your body's ability to fight tumors. The American Medical Journal, published in August 2016, reports that individuals taking 8 portions of fruits and vegetables a day scored much higher life satisfaction, happiness, and well-being. Still, we're talking about the food, and this is with research of Dr. Arthur Furst from Stanford University. He was a chemotherapy pioneer, a pharmacologist, a toxicologist, and a prevention nutrition researcher. Chemotherapy pioneer who in his retirement wanted to make chemotherapy redundant by prevention. Isn't that cool? He developed a lipotropic adjunct with B6, B12, folic acid, betaine, hydrochloric acid, bioflavonoids in the 1980s. He developed carotenoid complex in the 1980s, contains red, orange, yellow, and green leafy vegetables and fruit. He developed cruciferous plus early 1990s, contains cruciferous vegetables that Randy Jirtle later discovered, with quotation marks. You can't really discover something after someone else has discovered it. He developed garlic allium complex in the 1980s, and that contains garlic, onions, leeks, and chives, all histone inhibitors. He helped develop an acidophilus complex, early probiotic for the microbiome in the 1980s, which I think is pretty early for microbiome knowledge. So here's just a quick summary on a 30-year Harvard study with 100,000 folks. Researchers say changing one simple habit could add years to your life. Now, the habit that they were looking at was drinking soda, or as we say in Michigan, pop. Men who drank 2 or more sodas a day had a 29% higher risk of dying early than those who drank 1 or less a month. Ladies who downed 2 or more sugary drinks a day had a terrifying 63% higher risk of early death. Both men and women who drank 2 or more sugary drinks a day were 31% more likely to die from heart disease and were 18% more likely to die from cancer. The more sodas people gulped down, the higher their risks rose. Artificially sweetened sodas did lower the risk of death, but high consumption of artificially sweetened beverages is still linked with a higher death rate, especially among women. Always women. And here we have this graphic again. So we have talked a little bit about disease exposure. We've talked about the microbiome. And we're going to talk about psychological, I believe, alternative medicine. We're going to talk about alternative medicine. Epigenetic modulation, alternative medicine, omega-3s, carotenoids. 25 years ago, I talked about the importance of phytonutrients. And by I, this is Dr. Bruce Dew, who created this class and also this slideshow is talking. This is not me, Darcy Lewis. So 25 years ago, I talked about the importance of phytonutrients at medical conference. I quoted the carotenoid research of Professor Arthur Furst from Stanford. The MDs dismissed them alternative medicine. Today, carotenoids are mainstream, those known to aid prevention against macular degeneration, and even more. Still talking about this, fluid intelligence is the ability to solve new problems, use logic in new situations, and identify patterns. Crystallized intelligence is the ability to use learned knowledge and experience. Decline in fluid intelligence is one of the most debilitating aspects of age-related cognitive decline. Now it's used as a sign of early onset Alzheimer's. 3 omega-3s are specific to brain health and function: ALA, SDA, and ETA, and the same carotenoids related to macular degeneration enhanced omega-3s. And here is the graphic again, and I think now we're going to talk about psychological states. Psychological epigenetic modulators. These habitual responses don't help long-term cognition and longevity. I am not what has happened to me, Carl Jung says. I am what I choose to become. Don't be like these guys. Psychological epigenetic modulators, long work hours, and weekend working do not help mental health. Globalized and 24/7 business operations have fueled demands for people to work long hours and weekends. Increased depressive symptoms were independently linked to working extra long hours for women. Increased depressive symptoms were associated with working weekends for both genders, suggesting these work patterns may contribute to worse mental health. Here's Dr. Larry Dossey. Healing beyond the body. He said, the tools of our consciousness, beliefs, prayers, thoughts, intentions, faith, correlate more strongly with our health, longevity, and happiness than do our genes. How about that? What one thinks about one's health is one of the most accurate predictors of longevity ever discovered. Wow, that really shows we have a lot of power to control. We have control. Here is Dr. Candace Pert. Late but brilliant, very brilliant. She has since passed. Mind does not dominate body, it becomes body, she says. I find I cannot separate brain from body. Consciousness is not just in the head, nor is it a question of the power of the mind over the body, because they are flip sides of the same thing. Mind does not dominate body, it becomes body. This is from Molecules of Emotion that she wrote, Dr. Candace Pert, PhD. And here's Dr. Dawson Church again. From now on, it's your choice which reaction you habituate. When you shift from a position of worry, anxiety, and stress to one of happiness, joy, and love, you produce profound biological changes in your body. All kinds of fantastic shifts happen, like the ratio of 2 hormone changes. You decrease the output of cortisol, which is the chronic adrenal stress hormone, and you increase the production of DHEA, the main adrenal healing hormone. Peace in your heart and mind tells your adrenals to produce lots of DHEA, the cell repair hormone. Here's our graphic again. Next, we're going to talk about social interactions. Brief social interactions boost the brain's executive functions. Epigenetic functions allow us to focus, plan, prioritize, organize. In one study, there were 3 groups: speaking to strangers, competitive speaking, and silent. The friendly small talk group did best in cognitive function tests. Researchers to follow: chat to strangers, retirement readiness. You shape your years ahead. Your epigenetic modulation decisions are crucial. You are in the driver's seat and make the choices. You can turn on the genes of longevity, wellness, and vitality, and turn off the genes of aging, disease, and cell apoptosis, death. Your genetic profile is not your destiny. We are all self-made, but only the successful will admit it. Earl Nightingale. You can change your gene expression by the things you think, say, and do, the things you eat, avoid, or listen to, and what you ponder in your heart. Have fun, be active, and do the things you love. Stop aging.